What's going on, guys? Welcome to the What's Up Dog Cast. My name is Tanner Kotowske. This is Corey Kotowske, my brother, and then Steve Kotowske, my dad. Steve Kotowske is the owner of What's Up Dog, Von Herter House Kennels, and Armored Canine, and Corey is our operations manager. I am the lead trainer over at What's Up Dog. Today, we're here with Dr. Travis Atkins from Square Pet. How are you doing today?
Oh, all good, all good. Glad to be with you.
Awesome. All right, well, kind of starting off, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you do now, how you got started in the pet food industry, and as well as just in veterinary practice.
Yeah, no problem at all. Right now, I'm a co-founder of a company called Square Pet Nutrition, and our primary focus is veterinarian formulated nutrition. And really, where we've found our niche and what our target is to make premium solutions-based veterinary nutrition, essentially taking away the need for a prescription, making it more available to the general public, and cleaning up the ingredient deck. That's kind of what Square Pet's about as far as how I got into kind of Square Pet and the pet food industry in general. Was kind of through no fault of my own. My brother and I kind of grew up in the pet food industry as a result of my dad's career. My dad, Peter Atkins, he was the co-founder of a company called Natura Pet Products, which formed in kind of the early 90s. They were kind of trailblazing in the kind of one of the first companies to use fresh ingredients in pet food, fresh meats, fresh fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. And ended up having some pretty good success and ultimately transitioned to essentially ended up selling the company. But throughout that time, my brother and I were exposed to, gosh, everything from retail to distribution to actually working in manufacturing plants, which kind of stimulated my desire to go off and work with animals. And I ended up going to veterinary school, earned a degree in veterinary medicine, to where I ended up practicing for a number of years in family medicine and then in emergency before I kind of left that to start Square Pet with my brother and my brother Tyler and my dad Peter. So we launched Square Pet kind of in, oh gosh, late 2019, right before all the fun happened in 2020. So interesting times for that first year. But since then, since everything's opened up, we've really gained a niche in the industry and really started to resonate with folks like yourself. And not only that, but just with kind of end consumers in general, really are gravitating towards the concept of having kind of higher quality veterinary nutrition, and most times at a more reasonable price point too. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as far as kind of general health with Square Pet, I've seen a lot with doing the training side of things. I've seen a lot of Square Pet products help other dogs that have been on other prescription diets in the past that just haven't worked. You kind of explained a little bit of that niche, getting into the more affordable side of things. How does that compare to something like one of these big prescription diets that are very expensive? But as far as quality goes, how does that compare?
Yeah, that's the big secret with it's a really good question. So that's the kind of what people perceive. They put these veterinary diets kind of on a pedestal and think they can't be touched because they have some kind of secret ingredients or secret formulation and that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, that there's been a lot of research and a lot of legwork and a lot of academic side things to land on what these diets are. So I'm not trying to dissuade them and not trying to talk down about any of these veterinary diets at all. But they all in the end have nutritional targets that they're achieving, right? So if you take Formula A or Formula B, they each have their own specific nutritional targets, whether that's a micronutrient or a macronutrient or ratio of those two nutrients. And all they're doing is taking ingredients and hitting those nutritional targets. And so we've taken that same philosophy. We work with board certified veterinary nutritionists who formulate these things on a daily basis, both for homemade kind of things and then also commercially as well. And so we know what those targets are. We know how to achieve them. And what we're doing is just using higher quality ingredients to obtain those same nutritional targets to help support those dogs that may have those conditions that respond to those needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as a veterinarian yourself, you actually use a board certified veterinarian nutritionist to work with you on your products. So I'm the guy that likes to peel scabs off. Because I really like to get people thinking when we're talking in terms of food. That's what we've built our business on: feed the body, feed the brain, as a training company first, and then diving deeper into nutrition. And I'll go into that a little bit because of my background. But you use a nutritionist. It doesn't just rest on your shoulders as the veterinarian saying, "Hey, this is what sounds good. This is what seems good." But you're actually using a nutritionist. Can you just talk to that just a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's a very, I'm glad you brought it up because it's a really important part and really a distinguishing characteristic of Square Pet in general, because that's really, when you look at the big brands, the big veterinary brands, they're backed by board certified veterinary nutritionists that are formulating their diets, managing their diets, et cetera, et cetera. And so we couldn't rightfully come to market with a product that just is formulated by me, just a general practitioner veterinarian with, a pretty good understanding of nutrition and that kind of thing. But when it comes down to the micronutrients, when it comes down to the ratios of this and that, it's really important to have someone that knows exactly what they're doing. And so we work with 2 board certified veterinary nutritionists as well as a PhD animal nutritionist. And so kind of the way that we formulate or develop the diets is probably a better way to put it, is we get together, I kind of have a concept, kind of a loose formula, and then we hash it out. They plug it into all their software and spits out all the projected nutrients, all the projected ratios of nutrients. And then from there, we actually go to test the diet. And so we test the diet, make sure it's hitting those nutritional targets that we're trying to achieve. If it doesn't, then we go back and make the adjustments. And we kind of do that all the way until it gets commercially ready for production. And then even from that point, we're still kind of evaluating where things are falling all along the way. But the point is that, yeah, we absolutely want to do this the right way. We know that what we're bringing to the market is really, really different than what you would find kind of as your general everyday feeder, your everyday diet that's hitting, some core nutritional targets. But what we're trying to do is really take that nutrition to another level and fine tune it, so that we can say, for the diets that we have out right now, they are an apples to apples comparison to what you would find on the veterinary clinic side.
So my background is in food and nutrition. I was a professional chef for about 18 years, feeding the masses, and a dog hobbyist for a lot of years before I went professional. So for me, when I look at ingredient decks, it's really, really important to me. And I love the ingredient deck that you guys put forth. We have really stood on the value of your product. And by just looking at an ingredient deck and saying, all right, these are good ingredients, these are wholesome ingredients, and you guys back the nutrition value of those ingredients, the nutritional values there. It's been really nice to go to market and just show people that there is an alternative product that they can look at that actually has good ingredients. And so for me, that's been a big deal. In fact, in our stores, we don't carry anything outside of your product for specific needs-based diets, which has been a big stand for us. Because we believe in those ingredients that are there, and just based on my background, looking at ingredients wholly, on their own, they have to stand on their own. We appreciate what you guys are bringing to market, and can't wait to see the expansion and new things that come in the future. So we appreciate you guys.
No, I appreciate that. That's very, very, very kind of you. But that's exactly the point. I mean, there's an opportunity there. There's considerable. You're on the ground floor. I mean, I'm sure you maybe hear it, see it, talk about it on a daily basis with your customers. There's a growing, I won't say full-on pushback, but today's consumer, pet owner, pet parent is way more versed in nutrition and reading ingredient panels, and there is pushback to like, hey, my dog's not feeling that great and it needs this diet, but my personal philosophy is I don't like these certain ingredients in there, but there aren't any other options. And that's kind of where we're trying to trying to fill that void.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's great. I do have to excuse myself real quick.
Oh.
We're having a issue in our store with a customer, so
Okay.
I'm gonna go handle that. I'll be right back.
All right,
That's where Tanner went as well.
It's gonna be,
It's gonna be y'all two for a second.
it's gonna be us then. This will be great. I can do this without the guys with me, because they
That's
make cringe at some of the stuff that I say. You know, for me, because it's our company, it's my company, right? And I get to pick and choose ultimately what we have. Even though Corey's my buyer, operations manager, and he really does a great job at sourcing products and studying nutrition. I almost feel like, and he'll hear this later, obviously, but I feel like he set forth to learn more than I knew, which is great in nutrition. So what that gives us is a good challenge inside when people come in and we talk to Steve and we talk to Corey and this and that, but it's the same information that they get, and he's done a really good job with just learning these products, what the ingredients mean, who does what, and what the control standards are, all the different things, which I really appreciate. You know, it's kind of like with you guys with a family business. There is that challenge there sometimes, and it's been good for us, and our customers have loved it, and it's kept us for a little over 10 years now, rocking and rolling.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Congratulations on that. But yeah, no, I mean, that's really encouraging and awesome to hear. Just gathering that foundation of nutritional information, because that's one of the things, I'm sure you get it too. It's just, I field emails or calls daily of just kind of these off the wall nutritional philosophies, and it's from people that are well intended and you know, they just don't have, you know, that baseline foundational understanding of just, you know, macronutrients, if you will, and
Correct.
And so just to have a resource like y'all to be able to go to is awesome, because that there's not everyone's like that, that's for sure.
Well, we get asked a lot, you know, why don't you carry the other products? And for us, it becomes real simple. Just let me look at an ingredient deck and let me just read this to you, and I'll go pull it up on a computer, and I'll show them the ingredients. And, you know, there are some ingredients that I take, you know, kind of this indifference to, that I don't see in your products, which I really like. You know, someone will say, well, why does my dog have cellulose in its dog food? And there's a reason for it, right? There's absolutely a reason for it. There's a reason for different pieces and parts that are in there, because they do chemically do different things, and they can help, you know. But when I point over to my cat litter and I said, I have cat litter that's 100% cellulose, and they look at me funny and they said, am I feeding my dog cat litter? I said, no, you're not feeding your dog cat litter, but I'm just telling you that this cellulose is multifunctioning, and depending on how it's broken down, it can be used for cat litter. And
That's right.
they really get excited about that. They, you know, they're not sure what to think when they hear it, because no one has ever explained it to them before, what those ingredients are. And so I do it from a way that I love to really get people's brain moving, and think about what it is that they're feeding their dog. So it's you know, when we have discussions that, you know, that's what I'm doing to people. I'm really getting them to think about what they're feeding.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really important as well. I mean, so many people are kind of robotic and have bought the same thing for years, or have the same kind of tunnel vision, and have never stopped to ask the question. So that's great.
If we look on the veterinary side and the medical side of things, I want to ask you a question. One of the things that I consider, we look at pancreatitis. That has become somewhat of an issue, but as we break it down, and the way that I see it from my studies and looking at it, pancreatitis is more prevalent in the miniature breed, smaller dogs, right? And there's an interesting, I guess, correlation in some of the things with that. So I look at salivary amylase, and I look at the pancreas, not just fat. And how do we tax the pancreas in that event of producing salivary amylase, and then these small dogs who actually crunch their food versus a larger dog who typically just inhales their food.
Right.
I had a question. My question is this: is there a correlation? Is there a real correlation in that with these small dogs who seem to actually crunch up and eat their food, and the higher predisposition for pancreatitis, taxing their pancreas because of the salivary amylase, and versus the bigger dogs? Is that something that should be considered? Is it considered? Because we don't see it considered most of the time here when we talk about those, come to us from a veterinarian. Well, dog has pancreatitis. We need a different food, and is that something that we should be looking at?
That's quite honestly, I can't see why not. My understanding of pancreatitis is that it's pretty idiopathic, meaning that there's really not a definitive cause. I mean, you find the dogs that got into the trash after Thanksgiving and ate the turkey and came back, a fatty meal kind of thing, and break out with pancreatitis.
Or I just gave him one piece of bacon.
Yeah, right. They got, just dietary indiscretion kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is a possibility, just because there's not, like, you can't put your finger on one exact cause of what causes pancreatitis. I remember, let's see, doxies, 11-year-old female spayed doxies are kind of like the prototypical pancreatic target, schnauzers as well.
Schnauzers, yeah.
So those are what I kind of saw in practice, but talking about amylase and not being able to kind of pre-break it down and give it a head start, the food to head start kind of through the digestive process, it's certainly a possibility. And I say that just because I don't know if I personally am not a pancreatitis expert and internal medicine specialist or anything like that, but it could be a consideration for sure.
I was just started, I think in weird ways, and as I started, everybody comes in with the our dog has acute pancreatitis, and we can't have fat anymore. And well, let's drop those carbs down a little bit too, and let's drop the carbs, let's drop the fat, let's drop the carbs down, and let's see if we can get a whole picture to help. It's not just low fat. With these mini breeds, mini poodles, the schnauzers, and the mini doxies and all that. So we see a lot of that, but I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a consideration, for sure. I mean, I think that there's a genetic predisposition, as you mentioned. I think that in some dogs, there's environmental exposures that disrupt the immune system, whether that's through nutrition or just other toxicities or what have you. But certainly enzymatic, pre-digestion kind of things and the nutrition that goes along with it can potentially be a cause of pancreatitis as well. So, I guess just real quick, one of the things people ask me sometimes too is, why do we feed a low-fat diet for pancreatitis? And in kind of abbreviated version is, when you look at the macronutrients that we eat, so proteins, fats, and carbs, proteins and carbohydrates. Actually, let me back up just a second. So your pancreas essentially is an organ inside of your gut or inside of your belly that produces digestive enzymes, and there's essentially goes into the intestine and helps digest all the food that you eat. And the most potent stimulator of enzymatic release from the pancreas is fat. And so when you think about managing that, one of the things you want to do is eliminate or decrease that stimulus of enzymatic release from the pancreas. And so that's why you want to try and lower the fat. Also, fat tends to not digest as fast quickly through the GI system, so it dwells in the stomach and in the intestine, versus something like proteins and carbs, which tend to be digested a lot more quickly. So you have fat that's stimulating the pancreas to produce more of this digestive enzyme that actually is, I forgot to mention what causes pancreatitis. The digestive enzyme is produced too much that it actually is auto-digesting or eating up the pancreas itself. And so what we want to do is limit that stimulus and also not stall out the GI transit time of the food that we eat or they eat.
Right. So I don't know if you guys touched on this because I had to step out, but I like to talk about hydrolyzed versus non-hydrolyzed proteins. What is your opinion on doing too many hydrolyzed versus doing a non-hydrolyzed diet?
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand the question. So the difference between a hydrolyzed and a regular diet, or a hydrolyzed diet with multiple hydrolyzed sources.
Just the difference between the regular diet and the hydrolyzed.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So when we think about hydrolyzed diets, I always go to food allergies. We're thinking about dogs that have sensitivities to certain ingredients that cause them to break out in those ear infections, hot spots, just miserable itchiness, that kind of thing. And just to step back on, what is hydrolyzed? Hydrolyzed essentially is a protein that's been broken down into its elemental molecules. So it's amino acids and kind of small protein fragments. The way that we typically try and explain it is, if you go back to middle school or whenever we learned about the building blocks of protein, you have amino acids, and those are the building blocks to ultimately form an intact protein. And what we're doing with hydrolyze it is to take that intact protein and just do the building of a protein in reverse. So breaking it down into those amino acids and small protein fragments. And what is the benefit of providing a hydrolyzed protein diet? Well, if a dog has a specific allergy to a specific intact protein, that protein tends to bind to receptors inside of the gut during digestion. And once it binds to that receptor, if it is allergic to that particular protein, it sends a cascade of inflammatory reactions, essentially causes the allergic reaction, the hot spots, the ear infections, and everything else.
Right.
When we feed the hydrolyzed diet, it's those small little protein fragments or amino acids in their free phase don't really bind into those receptors quite as neatly, and so there's an opportunity for it to sort of evade the immune system, if you will. Just setting the stage, the difference between a hydrolyzed protein and a regular protein or intact protein diet. What is the difference? I guess the way to explain it is, if I'm not considering a dog that has a food allergy or some kind of sensitivity, I'm not really looking at a hydrolyzed diet. And because there's obviously a million other options out there outside of that. But what's important when we feed hydrolyzed diets is that you don't have a hydrolyzed diet that has an intact protein source in it, that it doesn't have a laundry list of other ingredients. It needs to be a pretty simple ingredient panel. It needs to be that limited ingredient diet. Essentially, your hydrolyzed protein, a starch source, and your, if you need them, your vitamins and minerals.
Right.
So I don't know if I got to the heart of that question there.
No, you did. That's perfect. So kind of leading into that though, feeding a dog that doesn't have any protein allergies, a hydrolyzed diet, can that affect producing those digestive enzymes that they need if they were to switch back to a non-hydrolyzed diet later on in their life?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. With feeding a hydrolyzed diet, it's probably unnecessary. I don't think that, the risk, I suppose, when you get down into the nitty gritty is that if that dog was to develop a food allergy later down the line, they've already been exposed to this particular type of hydrolyzed protein.
Gotcha.
And so that particular diet wouldn't be novel to them if you're trying to diagnose that food allergy down the line. So you'd have to find another hydrolyzed diet or other protein source or something like that.
Gotcha. Perfect.
So I've got a question. With humans, we know that allergies can be cyclic, right? And you can even kind of narrow it down to some certain time frames and things like that with allergies. I used to have some issues. I used to be allergic to cats and dogs, which is kind of interesting. But they say they can be cyclic, even to environmental stuff. Besides, very specific things as cats and dogs, oak, and you name it. What about with dogs? Is there a cyclic time frame that we look at with allergies with dogs?
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure. Not so much food allergies. I mean, that's one of the diagnostic rule outs is like, hey, is my dog itchy and scratchy all year long, or is it only itchy and scratchy certain months out of the year. And if you can pinpoint, the seasonality to it, then well, you shouldn't say no, but there's less likely a food allergy going on,
Right.
but it's more likely a seasonal allergy. And so, yeah, absolutely. You have dogs that move from different parts of the country. I hear this a lot too. It's like, hey, I was up north or I was down south and I moved over here and my dog doesn't have allergies, or vice versa, and that kind of thing.
Well, and that's why I wanted you to speak to that, because we get
Yeah.
a lot of that here.
Yeah.
Lots of it, and then different grasses, different weeds, all the different things, different emergent periods when those grasses and weeds, are coming up. We hear a lot of that, so that's actually that's great to hear from you.
Yeah, and it's really tough to distinguish between, because everyone likes to blame the food, right? Yeah, that's kind of how it is. Like my dog, it's completely separate. We hear it all the time when I was practicing. Dogs vomiting and diarrhea, having diarrhea. I don't, gosh, how many times I heard it. Like they always say, "Oh, my neighbor threw rat poison or something over the fence." Happened 0% of the time, but it was a common thing. But you always like to it's like, hey, my dog's eating this, and now it's scratching, so it's an easier association. But the challenge with the seasonality is that those dogs, their immune systems are ramped up, they're hypersensitive, so there could be a component of food allergy that goes along with it too. And so sometimes we do recommend offering a hydrolyzed diet to those dogs in case there is, or I shouldn't say hydrolyzed, I should say trying to diagnose a food allergy. So we're trying to, offer a limited ingredient diet that's not having any improvement, hydrolyzed diet, or, some kind of novel protein, not just hydrolyzed, but trying to diagnose some other kind of food allergy that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So you have both sides of the coin here for this question. As a veterinarian and as a dog food manufacturer, oftentimes I'll get people that'll come in and say, my dog doesn't like the taste of its food anymore. I need to change foods. I would love for you to speak to that.
Oh boy, I'd love to hear your
I'll tell you mine first, right? So, so I do canine nose work. So I study the nose. I also understand that the dog doesn't have a ton of taste buds. And so taste is not that big of an issue. It's more smell and preference. And I tell everyone I'm the anti-salesman when they come into my store. Well, can I buy some toppers and cans and this and that?
Yeah, he makes my numbers look really bad.
I make his numbers look bad. But there's a reason for that, Doc. And I'll share that with you in a minute. But I often tell people, listen, for myself, I'll take toppers home to my dogs. I have 4 dogs at home, and I treat them, and I'll throw toppers on and this and that. They eat it so fast they don't care. But their nose, they smell it while I'm making it, and things like that is great. But I don't force toppers on people. When their dog's hungry, it's going to eat. It eats cat poop, it'll eat food. But if you're feeding it cheese and you're feeding it, shredded chicken, and you're doing all these things, and you're wondering why your dog no longer eats its normal diet, it's not about necessarily that taste, and my dog doesn't like it anymore. It simply prefers that shredded chicken that you're giving it, right? So I would love for you to share that, because you have both sides of the coin.
We're on the same page. I mean, your line about them eating cat poop is kind of where I go. I mean, if you're going to eat feces, you don't have that distinguished of taste, the taste buds. I go to exactly like you said, that kind of olfactory, the smell, temperature. If it's a food that's been, it's cold outside, and no one really wants to eat that cold because it doesn't have that much smell. I'll make the texture of it. If they're wanting to add water or something, something like that. But in my experience, most of the time it was my dog will only eat chicken and rice. And I'm like, well, if you stop feeding the chicken and rice every day, they'll probably be hungry and eat their other food. So I guess to distill it all down, I totally agree with you. I don't think that dogs have that acute of sensory as far as taste goes. I don't think that they get I want to be very careful when I say this, but I was kind of going in the range of variety like humans, to where we need to have something for different for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that needs to change every single day. I don't think that dogs have that desire to have that much variation over time, gradual, that kind of thing is certainly appropriate and fine. But as far as just really acute sense of taste, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, we see that a lot. And so what I explain to people, this is what makes Corey cringe, is, hey, distilled water is a lot cheaper than those cans of food right now. Just add a little water to it. But kind of my reasoning for doing that, and I'll explain this to some clients that come in, when they said, well, why don't you try to sell us toppers or bone broth or this or that? Well, if you prefer to use it and you want to use it, that's fine. I have no problem, but just, use a little bit of it. But my goal is to give them a business with living dogs. And I've shared that with people before, because I want people's dogs to live longer, so that when I step out, these guys have clients for a long time.
Sure.
People that want to keep coming back because they've had great sound nutritional advice and their dog is healthy. And I think that people actually can appreciate that. And that's kind of where I base my thinking on the business. So that's family business. It's so smart.
Well, it breeds loyalty, breeds trust, all of those things. So I think that's really smart.
Well, we say that. When are your cans coming out? I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Don't get Chad in trouble.
I'm going to get Chad in trouble. You guys you've got to have cans at some point. And we're excited because we know it's going to happen at some point. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, all I can say right now is we are actively working as hard as we can to bring those cans to fruition. Right now, if things go, knock on wood, if things go according to how they should, then we're targeting kind of Q1 of 2023.
That's exciting.
The initial kind of offering will just be analogs of the existing VFS diets, so just the solutions based lines, and kind of saving any other extensions, where we won't try and be too greedy and just get what we can get right now.
Right.
I'm excited for it, just because it offers us something to go hand in hand, where there is that preference to have canned, or there's a need to have canned and all that. So we're excited for you guys, because I think we're going to see a big boost in what we're offering, obviously, with what you guys are offering. So
well, thank you for that. And it's one thing that we've heard ever since we had the dry diets out is, to have cans to go along with that. And in a lot of ways, especially like our low phosphorus formula, right? It's intended to help support dogs that have been diagnosed with kidney disease. And one of the best things you can do is moisture, hydration. So having a wet diet option to that is incredibly important. So
absolutely,
fingers crossed we can make it happen.
Yeah,
it'd be amazing. I mean, that was where I was going.
Well,
so
I
don't want to get Chad in trouble.
You're gonna get Chad in trouble. He texted me right before we got on podcasting. It's like, do you want me on the call too? Glad he didn't join. Would have gotten him in trouble.
Well, as far as going back to the taste, you talked about how dogs are hypersensitive with their bodies compared to us. I actually just had to step out and deal with somebody like this. They went away from a food that they were on because their dog completely, what they said, boycotted the food. And it's not that, again, like he didn't like tasting the food. And sometimes it wasn't even about smell. A lot of the times, what I've seen is it's sometimes about how it makes their body feel. Because some of these foods that aren't the greatest foods in the world, you can put water on it, you can put whatever on it, even a can, and they might even eat around the kibble at that point. What do you kind of think about with the hypersensitivity to how it makes the body feel on top of that smell / taste, or whatever you want to call it, versus a good food versus a bad food?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, maybe difficult to try and piece together, because what you're referencing is not so much whether or not they're accepting the diet or not. They're eating the food, but it's causing them to not perform as well as what they typically would. Is that kind of what you were?
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times those dogs will stop eating that food. And then I'll switch them to something while they're, for instance, with my experiences, board and train program that we have, dogs will come in severely underweight sometimes. And I'm like, okay, what are they eating? And they're like, oh, well, they're finicky eaters. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to switch the food and try to figure something out. And then the first day they eat that good food, their appetite changes completely. They're wanting to
Sure.
scarf the food down because they just went out and played, or they went out and did training, and they actually had energy afterwards to spare almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I grasp kind of where you're going now. And, we look at kind of the easiest layup response to that is you have typically your most inexpensive foods or diets. I'm assuming that's the kind of where your baseline was. I mean, those are heavily carbohydrate laden foods, right? And then you switch over to something that's more protein dense, maybe more fat dense, energy dense in general, and then you're starting to see a response. And I think we all know what the answer to that is. I mean, dogs are essentially carnivorous. They actually, their muscles look different than what humans are. They essentially utilize aerobic metabolism, which essentially requires proteins and fats to be broken down and used for energy versus, like long distance runners and humans. We're using anaerobic metabolism and actually need a fairly decent carb load in order to maintain the stamina and energy and that kind of thing. But yeah, switching over from a high carbohydrate diet to a higher protein, higher fat diet, especially for those active dogs, which y'all have a ton of experience with, is incredibly, it's night and day sometimes.
Right. And I think one of them has another question too.
Another question?
Go ahead.
So as a veterinarian, so we get a lot of people coming in saying, we sell a lot of raw food. So we've got quite a few freezers and big program with that. But as a lot of people come in and they're like, what's the best way to feed your dog or our dogs? And my first go-to is always raw. If they don't have any issues, their dog's doesn't need a specialized diet for anything. The best way, in my opinion, I'm not a vet, is raw. You get the most meat and the bones and the organs. What's your opinion on raw food? Most vets have a very controversial opinion on it. So,
yeah, it started. I started off. I am totally on board with raw and have no issues with raw. And the only comment I have on raw personally is when it gets into the home preparation of raw, and then I worry about nutrient balance and nutrient deficiencies and that kind of thing. But commercially available raw, absolutely no problem. I think where the stigma started back when is kind of surrounding the I think where I'm going, the microbial contamination with raw, and that's kind of where the sticking point for vets and those immune compromised individuals that are feeding raw and that kind of thing. And I think that over time, obviously raw is a real thing now. As far as I'm referencing when those pushbacks first started, raw was pretty small. I mean, it was probably less than 5.
You only had a couple of companies really doing it at that point.
Yeah,
it was a niche group of people that were feeding,
Yeah, absolutely. And now it's obviously it's here to stay. And I think that over time, there's going to be more of an acceptance from the, I guess the younger veterinary crews that are kind of coming up over time. And I think some of the time veterinarians, quite honestly, if I don't step on anybody's toes here, but I think nutrition isn't a high priority in the sense of it's a long conversation, right? And if you have a busy day, you have a busy booking on your schedule, and you're trying to make it through your day, a 40-minute nutrition talk really doesn't fit in all that well on a typical day. And so it's a challenge that veterinarians have, and so that's where a lot of this miscommunication can kind of come through. It's kind of like a game of telephone. Well, my vet told me this. Well, actually the vet didn't really say that, but that's how you kind of heard it. And
they said, go to the lobby and pick something out. You can eat that.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess going back to where it started, I like the idea of the macronutrient profile of raw for a dog that doesn't have
Right.
any kind of concerns, issues, growing puppies, happy, healthy, just needs nutrition, especially if they're active, that higher protein, higher fat, really low carb kind of nature of food, I think is custom made for dogs and cats.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's good. So one of the things that we look at, like with overall dogs, I started studying canine obesity because that's a problem for me. But I'm the guy who's not afraid to tell even a stranger walking in my door, your dog could probably use a different diet and use a diet plan. And what I found in my studies, because I'm unashamed with the concept of speaking to people, but what I found is a lot of veterinarians, and this was from a study that I did, that one of the veterinarians doing the study said that he queried a bunch of veterinarians, and they said, we don't want to tell people their dog's overweight. I got a little pushback from a couple people in the veterinary world. So no, we tell people all the time. But the truth is, because the study's there, and people don't want to tell, the veterinarians in particular don't want to tell clients that their dog's overweight necessarily. I don't know if there's a gentle way to do it. I don't know that there's any way except for, well, looking kind of fluffy, and most people accept it. It's because they're coming into our store, and generally speaking, they understand why they're walking in the door, because one of their friends said, you should go in there. They know what they're doing. And then, so if I say something to them, it's good. But is there a way from the professional side that is more widely accepted as far as addressing it? I mean, I pull out a scale, here's the 1 through 9 scale. Don't use the 1 through 5 scale, use the 1 through 9 scale. We can get more specific and I can help you out. And I do things like that all the time. Tell me what you used to do, and obviously with it being in the food industry now, how do you address that with people? That's big.
You summarized it quite nicely. I mean, it is a touchy subject for a few different reasons. One is kind of just alluding to what I was talking to before, is it opens a can of worms. If it comes in for limping or some other problem, you're there to address that problem. But then at the same time, like, maybe he's limping because you got an extra 20 pounds or something like that on you. Let's address this problem first. But if I start talking about the weight thing, that's going to open up a whole nother discussion and add another essentially problem to what we're trying to go through. So there's that sort of component. There's also, when you work in day practice, it's based off of relationships and, maintaining friendliness and that kind of thing. And quite honestly, people get pretty ticked off if you say their dog's fat. And so it's kind of a pick and choose kind of thing. This is my experience. Like, hey, if I know I'm going to, this is going to go on deaf ears, I'm probably not going to bring up the conversation. But I think if it's a relationship that you have over time, then you can have quantitative data. And you're like, hey, Fluffy was 6 pounds heavier than the time before and 6 pounds heavier than that time. And so it's a trend line, and like, hey, what can we do about this? So it's really a kind of soft approach, I guess, if you will.
Because we have veterinarians that follow us. We have a lot of veterinarian friends in the area and some out of the area. So if y'all are listening, you're watching, send them over. I'll tell them their dog's fat. And just make the recommendation for them to come to our store, and I'll tell them their dog's fat, because I want the dog to be healthy. It's rough as a trainer to see dogs that can't perform at all. And we've had that before. And I've had to walk into even a group class and say, your dog would do a lot better if he lost about 15 pounds. They just kind of look at me, and we have to be bold, because to me, we have to advocate for the animals. And sometimes people fall short of advocating for their own animal. And so I don't mind stepping in and advocating for their animal, hoping that they'll glean something from what I have to say. But it's a touchy subject.
It really is, but it's a real problem. I mean, it is kind of just nationwide. It's a
56% of
issue.
dogs in the US are obese or
Yeah.
overweight, but it's bad. It's really, it's 56% is a lot. And that's something that we have to address nationwide. I think it's something that we have to address. They even in the studies I was showing, they actually tie it to the humans' eating habits, and there is a huge correlation with the data that definitely shows that. And so it's more difficult to convince people because they say, well, you know, I like them to have a couple extra pounds on them, and I'm thinking, you say that
You
now.
like it.
Yeah.
You like
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Doesn't.
Now, but your
That-
dog
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
like it.
the other really challenging thing too is that it's you know, it's their pet is their kid, right? And then they want to take care of them and they
Yeah.
want to love them and they want that love in return. And you know, by giving a treat or offering more food, you see that tail go into hyperdrive and they're really excited. And so like, oh, I'm really taking good care of my dog because they're excited, they're loving me and that kind of thing. And you know, it's a tough deal because you know, how do you got to show love in different ways.
Right. Go
Constant
play.
treats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go buy a little toy and go play a little bit and get more active.
Okay.
And speaking just on top of that a little bit, a low-fat food is not always the answer for that dog that's overweight.
Right.
I'm gonna let you dive into that though, because if you can just speak to that just a little bit, because people need to know that it's not just changing to a low-fat food. There's other things and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do.
This
This is a great question. Something I always talk about when I'm talking about our low fat diet. I mean, that's it. Our low fat formula is, and this isn't intended just to talk about our low fat formula, but just in general, it's a digestive support diet. It's really geared for those dogs that have pancreatitis, GI disturbances, that kind of thing. It's kind of your fallback to your diet, your lower fat version of your regular fat kind of GI diet. As humans, we're conditioned to see low fat and think, okay, well, it's for weight loss, which you can use it for weight loss. You can use any diet for weight loss. You know, if you're adhering to the calories in versus kind of the calories out kind of philosophy. My personal preference is to use high protein diets, low carbohydrate diets. And the reason for that, and I found way more success over the years using those style of diets versus low fat, or the other alternative are kind of high fiber diets intended to kind of dwell in the stomach, so to speak, and kind of make these dogs feel fuller than what they actually are. I never had that as a repeatable kind of occurrence, but with high protein diets, protein keeps you satiated, keeps you fuller longer. And as long as you're paying careful attention to the calories that you're providing throughout the day, not only are they losing weight, but they're either maintaining the muscle mass that they had, or actually gaining the muscle mass, because in theory they should be exercising more and walking more and that kind of thing. Whereas if you use the high fiber, low fat diets, yeah, you might lose weight, but you kind of turn into kind of skinny fat, right? Like you might lose some muscle along with that. But if you're supplying a high protein diet that maintains those amino acids to help protein synthesis, plus they're staying fuller longer. You know, think about eating a steak versus eating Chinese food or something like that. Of equal proportions, you're going to stay fuller longer, the sense of feeling fuller longer after eating that steak. So it's a pretty easy answer for me. I'm a big fan of kind of high protein, low carb diets for weight loss.
So I'm going to interject for anyone who's listening, and what Dr. Travis just said, that's all based on a molecular level concept that and the true science. It's not about filling up with a satiety diet that just swells the belly. That's important, because a lot of people will miss that. They'll just look at, like you said, that high fiber diet stays in the belly, does all the things. But the truth is, in reality, it's on the molecular level with those higher proteins that the body's going to actually feel fuller and maintain muscle, and not have wasting and all those things that are important and that are critical for longevity and healthiness and all that. So that's real. I'm glad that you put it the way that you did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Travis, thank you for coming on. We're going to kind of wrap this up. We've heard from the kind of a veterinarian perspective on dieting, on just general nutrition, but also general health in dogs. We've heard training perspectives and everything like that as well. What have you guys got coming up as we end here for Square Pet? What's anything exciting coming up that you guys want to share? And where can we find you guys on social medias, website, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we alluded to earlier, one of the things we're really focusing on is trying to provide wet diets or canned diets for our existing VFS or veterinarian formulated solutions line. Hopefully targeting Q1 of 2023. Kind of around that same time frame, we have another diet which is being rebranded. It's been we launched it as our Square Pet turkey and chicken formula, and it kind of segues nicely to what we were just talking about, which is a high protein, low carbohydrate diet. And we've rebranded that, both dog and cat, and then went ahead and added an additional flavor to that, to both of those. So we'll have turkey and for both. Let's see, the canine formula will have a turkey and chicken formula as well as a red meat formula. Cool. And then we will have a turkey and chicken in the feline as well as a herring and salmon in the feline side. So those are going to be targeted for Q1 of next year as well. So we're looking forward to those, especially having that style of diet is. There's a lot of high protein diets out there, but there's not any that have the lack of carbohydrates that this one has, and kind of where we align it is sharing the same similar macronutrient profile to that of raw. I'm not saying it's raw food by any stretch of the imagination in kibble form, but we're trying to target those macronutrient profiles of raw, ultra low carbohydrate, ultra high protein. So that's what's on the docket. As far as social media stuff, our website is www.mysquarepet.com, and then I believe our Instagram and everything else is MySquarePet as well. Awesome.
Well, it's been a good time talking with you. Got a lot of information. I like the new stuff that's coming out. It's gonna be a lot of fun to work with. You guys have any closing remarks or anything?
No, I just want to say thanks for what you guys are doing. We're happy to have your products in both of our stores, and we appreciate your approach to canine nutrition.
Yeah, we're flattered by that, and appreciate the opportunity to come on and visit with you all. It was fun, and appreciate the support. And if there's anything that we can do, we certainly are here to help.
Awesome,
great,
thank you. All righty, thanks so much, Dr. Travis.
All right, nice to meet you.
All right,
nice to meet you. Take care.